we're focused on dynamic testing. And what I mean by dynamic testing is what can the paddle do to the ball? There's really two things that matter the most.
Paddle testing, what are your thoughts on it? And see that you guys are trying to find a way to regulate, which makes sense, right? Got to be difficult to deal with.
Definitely. So we recently hired Jason Aspis, used to be over at the kitchen, a great guy. Honestly, my number one complaint on him would be he cares more about pickleball than our company, which I think is a perfect person to put in a position like that. So really what we're focused on is, this last 2 years, talk about controversy with paddle testing. A new brand like us, again, we're 5 years old. The hope always originally was, can we lean on USA Pickleball to make that stamp and make that certification mean something? How do we let players, manufacturers, fans, and everyone have confidence on the court to say everyone's playing this within the same legal limits? And unfortunately, we tried for a couple years. USA Pickleball used to be out at every event. They tried to test, and the gap was just too big for the confidence level for both manufacturers and both for players. And we have gambling coming into the sport as well, and it's continuing to grow. A lot of people have gambled on pickleball this year. A lot of people say, hey, when is gambling going to start? No, gambling's going. And it's up and it's going, and it's growing fast, and just like everything in pickleball. But when we look at paddle testing and where we're trying to take it, the problem is when you have 2,000 different paddle manufacturers that are all getting approval, it's very hard for one very small group to be able to actually govern the entire integrity. And so really where we started, we formed a company called UPAA. And the hope of that is to make sure all players feel like, hey, I'm going out there and I'm playing on an equal playing field. And the first and most important thing that we decided to do this last November. And the first and most important thing is making sure that we're actually testing something that actually matters. So the very first thing that we've done is we have engaged with a lab, and we're focused on dynamic testing. And what I mean by dynamic testing is what can the paddle do to the ball? One is, there's really two things that matter the most. There's three things that matter, but two things matter the most. One is, how fast does the ball come off my paddle? And number two is, how much can I make that ball spin with my paddle? How many times can it spin? And so we now have the testing in a lab, millions of dollars of equipment to be able to test those two things. So now we have to put the rules in place. Those things are not going to be able to travel to events. So now what we're trying to do is paddles come in, they get tested, they get approved. How do we make sure that that paddle is the same paddle that's being used in play? And how can we have integrity through challenge process, static on-site testing that equates to variables that we're testing? But really where we got is, like, in order for us to get it to the point where we want it to be, we have to do it all in-house. We're going to have to do it ourselves. Right now, the way that we're looking at the sport, power, it's got to come down a little bit. Spin, if it was my preference, it would stay the same. I would say that most people think that that also should come down just a smidge. What we don't want to get to is to where pickleball was 4 years ago, where every point we were just pushing and dinking. Not ideal. Not ideal for sponsors, not ideal for TV. But right now, we're also getting to a point where people feel like they have to over dink because they're so scared for the counter coming back. So if I was the one making all the decisions, which I'm not, my preference would be power come down, spin stay about the same. I want to incentivize the speed up. I want to incentivize taking balls that are a little bit lower and trying to be a little bit more aggressive. But right now we have a paddle committee, advisory committee. We have a pro player committee, and then we have the UPA board. And between all three of those things, that's where the line's going to be set. We expect that line to be set in October. And then this will only govern pro play. But starting pro play in January, there will be new rules and new specifications that everybody's playing by.
How will it affect amateur players then? Like if one paddle is passed through the UPA and then they happen to play like a local event?
So the UPA paddles you'll be able to play with at the amateur level here. But we will also be letting amateurs participate with a USAP approved paddle as well.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you're an amateur, you can have, it could either be a UPAA approved paddle or a USAP approved paddle.
Cool.
At the pro level, only the UPAA.